Today, I'm going to talk about two super simple ways to back up Home Assistant automatically. The first uses automations to use the backup service call, and the second uses the Google Drive add-on in order to back up using its automation. Both of them are very, very simple to use, and although those aren't the only two methods for backing up Home Assistant, those are the two that I find the most easiest to use. What I won't talk about today is Samba backup. I do use Samba backup as well. That backs up to my local NAS in my network. Now that's not as hard as it might seem. However, it does require you to have some sort of backup server, and it does require a couple of additional steps. So we won't cover that today. However, I do have a video on that. And if you would like, you can watch that video, and it talks about how I do the Samba backup. I'll link that down below in the description. So let's get started showing you the two simplest ways to do backups. All right, so I'm going to demonstrate this on my test Raspberry Pi 4 that I'm using for Home Assistant and where I do a lot of my playground work. This is just a standard dashboard, and so I'm going to use a shortcut key to get to automation. So I'll click on the C key, and I'll type automations, and I'll navigate to my automations tab here. And I'm going to create a new automation by clicking this button down here. And instead of using a blueprint, I'm going to start with an empty automation. And this automation I'll call automated backup. And for the trigger, I'm going to choose a time. Now again, this is the easiest way to back up Home Assistant automatically. It will back everything up to your local Home Assistant drive, whatever you have it installed on. This does not back it up offsite or anywhere else. And we'll talk about the Google Drive here in a minute to do that. Let's just choose a time of 2 a.m. And I'll just pick that here, 2 a.m. or 2 p.m. Let's go 2 a.m. Whatever works best for you. It could be any time you want in there. Doesn't matter. And then for actions, I want to call a service. Now, this is probably also one of the most basic automations you can run as well, because all you're doing is picking a time and calling a service, and it's all done automatically for you. And under service, I can look for backup, and I can do either a full backup here, or I can do a partial backup. We'll start with a full backup. That's the simplest. You can give it an optional name. I like to leave it alone with no name because it defaults to the date and time. If you have a whole bunch of backup files, you need to know which one is the latest file if you need to restore. So you can just leave that as default or name it if you want to. And then you can provide an optional password. And then you can use compressed archives. I recommend this so it doesn't fill up your drive. Use the compressed archives. And then you just click on save. We're done. That's as easy as it is for a full backup. If we go back over here to run actions now, I can go ahead and click on run actions, and it'll take a minute to do a full backup. And when it's done, when you come over into the backup section of your Home Assistant instance, again, you can hit the C key and type backups, and it'll take you to the backup section. You'll see it show up here when it's finished. It'll take, depending on the size of your backup, the data in your backup, it'll take a little while to do this. So give it a few minutes and make sure that it runs properly, and then you can be sure that the automations run. So let's talk about a couple things while we're waiting. The first is that backup automation will just continue to create backups until it fills up your drive. It doesn't have any smarts, and it doesn't delete any backups that are already in there. So you're going to have to manage your backups in this list. You can also download backups. So if you click on one of the backups that are already here, you can click over here and click on download backup. And it'll start downloading that backup into your local PC that you're browsing this on. I'll go ahead and stop that because I don't need that right now. So although it's super simple to create backups, and I always recommend that you have backups, this doesn't do any management for you. When we talk about the Google Drive backups here in a few minutes, you'll see that you have a lot more options to control that. And although this is super simple, it might be better to do something like a Samba backup or the Google backup that I'm going to show you here in just a minute. And now you can see that the full backup has run. If you click on this backup, you will see, if you click on partial backup, even though it does the full backup, in order to see what it actually backed up, you click on partial. So you'll see that you have folders. So you have the local add-ons, the media SSL, and the share folder. And then you have add-ons. So you have AdGar, all my different add-ons. So this is a complete full backup. If I wanted to restore any of these, I could click on specific ones and click on just a restore of those specific backup items. That is a full backup. Now let's say you wanted to go ahead and do a partial backup. So we go back over to our automation, and we're going to modify the automation a little bit. And I only want to back up a few of my add-ons. I'm going to create a partial backup instead of a full backup. So let's go here and find a partial backup. And that would be down here, create a partial backup. And now what you have is you have, number one, you want to always back up your Home Assistant settings. That's probably normal for that. Let's say I only want to back up a few folders. Well, the way we do that is, since this is a list, we want to create a list of folders or add-ons to back up. Now we have to use the add-on slug, and let me show you how to figure out what the add-on slug is. If we click on our shortcut key, the C key, and click on add-ons, and go to add-on dashboard, we can choose any of these add-ons and click one. And you'll see here, up at the top, you'll see this add-on / whatever this is. This part right here is your slug. And so I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to go back over here to my Home Assistant instance where I'm setting up the automation, and I'm going to add that first one in here. So I've already copied it. I'm going to paste it. So this is A0, whatever it is, add guard. Now on my Home Assistant, every one of my add-ons start with this beginning part, and then an underscore and the name of the add-on. So I could add a few more in here if I wanted to, 954. And you'll probably find that a lot of these are the same on yours as well. I think it depends on the architecture and some other things to determine the beginning part of that slug. And then I want to back up tail scale. And I'll do it one more, A0, and just randomly a crony one. You can also do the same thing with folders. You can give it a name like I talked about before, and you can give it a password and then compression. We're going to go ahead and save this, and we're going to run our actions to see what it does this time. And we should get a partial backup. So let me go back up to my backups folder. A partial backup, and you can see it's already done here. If I click on this, you'll see that I have my Home Assistant settings, and then I have my 3 add-ons. And depending on how much you back up, it's going to determine how long the backups actually took. And it stores it locally. And like I said before, you'll start to see all of these start to show up in here, and it'll start to fill up your drive if you're not careful. So make sure you're managing this if you're doing the manual backup. Okay, so that's the backup for using an automation. Let's talk about backing up using the Google Drive backup. Now, Google Drive backup is an add-on in Home Assistant, and you can get to that through the normal add-on store, but you have to add the repository. So up here, when you go to this link, which I'll put in my description below, you click, or you'll copy this link, and you'll go back over to Home Assistant, and we're going to go to the add-on store or add-on dashboard. And then over here, we'll click on add-on store at the bottom right here. And you'll have to come over here and you'll have to add a repository. Now I've already done this, and you can see that I have Home Assistant Google Drive Backup Repository. If you didn't have that, you would come over here and you would click on, or you would paste that link you just clicked on and click on add, and it would show up in here as long as it's a properly formatted repository. Since I already have that in here, I can now search for Google Drive. Just type a couple characters until it filters out what you want. And now I have Home Assistant Google Drive Backup. I'm going to click on that. And you can read through all of this documentation if you would like to. It's got a lot of useful information. Most of that will set through the UI here in a few minutes. So I'm just going to go ahead and install it. And now it's installed. Under configuration, you can go in here and do some configuration. But we're going to go ahead and leave that alone because we're going to just go ahead and start it up. And we're going to open up the web UI. Now you can also set it to show on the sidebar if you would like to do that as well. I will leave that turned off for now, but that's totally up to you. So I'm going to click on Open Web UI. And it says Get Started, so it's very simple to do this. It takes you through all of the settings, all of the things you need to do right through the user interface. So none of the YAML stuff that you have to mess with. So it's going to need access to your Google Drive. On your first backup, it's going to create a new folder at the root of your drive where all your backups are going to be stored. Once it's created that folder, you can move it wherever you want to. So now it also tells me that I have 5 backups in Home Assistant already. Once I authenticate, the 4 newest backups are going to get uploaded. And of course, you can change all of that in the settings here in just a minute. First, we need to authenticate with Google Drive, and it tells you what it does here. Clicking the link authenticates you to an external domain maintained by the developer of this add-on, so the habackup.io. You can read the whole stuff. You can read this to understand why or what that is and what it means. You must agree to the privacy policy terms of service. And then the add-on will only have access to the files and folders it creates. It can't see any of the other files you've added to Google Drive. So the permissions prevent this add-on from doing anything. If you're uncomfortable with that, stop right here. I think there's a different way to do this without using that, but we're going to talk about that today. So let me just click on Authenticate. And you need to choose an account you're going to sign in with. I'll choose one of my accounts. So if you've already done this, which I have, it will tell you that it already has some access. See the service that has the access. Make sure you trust the domain, which we already talked about a minute ago, and then click on Continue. It's going to paste the authorization string in the box for you automatically. If it doesn't do that or doesn't work, make sure you copy this string first. So I'm going to copy it, because what you need to do is go back and put it on the first page we saw if this doesn't work. But I'm going to try to send the credentials over. Here's what it talks about here. You've authorized the add-on to connect to Google Drive and create the authorization string below. Most of the time you can just click Send Credentials to have them send directly to the add-on. But in some circumstances, it might just return an error. If it happens, just copy this, which I said we need to do. Make sure we copy this and paste it into the add-on where you clicked the Authenticate button a minute ago. So we're going to send credentials, and it should bring us back to the add-on, which it brings us to the add-on store. If we look here now, and we go back to the web UI, we now have authenticated the add-on, and it is working because you see this screen right here. What we see here is we have 5 backups in Home Assistant, 737 megabytes. We have 4 in Google Drive, which are the ones that I was playing around with the other day. And you can see down here we have all of the backups that are currently in our local Home Assistant instance. Now, it also tells you here that it's already found a folder named Home Assistant Snapshots. It's already the one that I had set up previously. And even when I didn't use this, I made a video about a year ago about doing this. It still found it from a year ago. So if you've ever played with this at all, you will see this folder. It's normal if you've used the add-on, which I just said. You'll need to decide where you want the backups to go. If you want to use this folder, you can choose the folder. You can choose a different folder or create a new folder. I am just going to use this one. Now, if I click Use Folder, it's going to merge the backups in Home Assistant from the ones that are in the drive and do all of the stuff it needs to do with that. So let me click on Use This Folder. This goes away. What it's doing now is it can also share error reports with the developer. I like that because it helps things get better. So I'm going to say yes to that. You can say no if you want to, completely optional. Now it's syncing down here. You can see that it's running through its whole sync process. It's grabbing everything up and it's sending things going over to the drive. You can see here it's uploading this one. That one's backed up. That one's backed up. This one's on Drive only, which means it's only on Google Drive. This one's local, and this one is local, HA only. Actually, this one's backed up, and this one is HA only, so it means it's only here on the local. And now let's talk about the settings for just a minute. If we go back into settings here, we can see that we have 4 backups in Home Assistant. That's how many we want to keep locally. And this is how many we want to send to Google Drive. You can also set it to 0 to clean up old backups entirely. You can set this to 0 to disable cleanup of old backups entirely. You can also set delete backups after upload, delete backups in Home Assistant immediately after uploading them to Google Drive. If your machine is low on space, that's okay. But if you do this, you always have to go to Google Drive to do a restore. If you're doing something locally and you mess something up, you can restore locally as well if you keep a few backups on your local device. So I would just leave that alone. Delete oldest backup before making a new one. This is useful. You can get rid of the oldest backup and then create a new one. That saves space, but it also will prevent you from using the backup that you just deleted if this one fails to create. So that's up to you again. Ignore other backups. It will ignore any backups that this add-on did not create. That might be useful as well. If you don't want it to, if you make a snapshot or point in time backup, you don't want Google Drive to mess with that, you can just leave this checked and it will ignore that one. And then finally, ignore other upgrade backups. If you know now, notice now in Home Assistant, when you do an add-on upgrade or do an update for something, it'll ask you to create a backup first. You can tell Google Drive to ignore those backups if you want it to. Those are the backups created during an upgrade process. You can tell it to ignore those if you want to. It's checked by default. For any ignored backups, automatically delete them after this much time. So you can put a specific amount of time in here. And then days between backups, you can back up daily. In this case, default is 3 days, every 7 days, whatever you would like. And you can choose the time of day when backups should be taken, and you put it in a 24-hour clock mode. And then you create a password. You can create backups that are password protected with this. And you can do a type or a backup name template. You can change it to whatever you want. Most of this you can leave as default. Just start the backup process. It puts them into your Google Drive as long as you have space there. And you don't really have to change any of the rest of this. But this is really nice because then you can do a whole bunch of stuff here to specify how you want it to act. And there's just tons and tons of things you can go through. You can even change the look and feel and a bunch of uncommon options here as well. So once you have your settings the way you want them, you can click on Save. And then under Actions, you have Backup Now, Sync Now, Open Drive Backups, Reauthorize Google Drive, Report a Bug, and then About. And then, of course, in the logs, which opens in a new tab, you can see what's going on in the logs to see if there's something that might be wrong or might something be going on. And your developer talks about what to do if you see something that's incorrect. So those are two simple ways to go ahead and back up your Home Assistant automatically. I think that it's very important that you back up on a regular basis, back up before you do upgrades, be ready to restore if something goes bad. And then it's best to have offsite backups. One reason is if your SD card fails on your device and you have only local backups, then you have nothing to come back to. If you have remote backups, such as Google Drive or something else, then you have a way to recover when there's an issue with the SD card or whatever's going on. Let me know if you have any questions down below. Make sure you check out my other backup video that talks about Samba if you want to use that one. If you're interested in me creating a new Samba video, let me know as well. Thank you to those that have joined the channel. They help support what I do here. If you're not a member, please consider joining the channel. You can also support me on Patreon. And then you can also drop a cup of coffee and Ko-fi if you would like that as well. All that's linked down below. I have a website if you'd like to look at it. It basically covers what I cover here in the videos. And with that, thank you for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.